Wajikaso Wajite Sangaji. Such a blessing always to be able to share with the Sangha here. And just a friendly reminder, please forgive me for any mistakes I may make in the translation of these teachings, doing my best to share the authentic teachings of the East with all of us so that we can continue to learn and grow. And Sangaji, coming into this week, honestly, I didn't really know what the title of this discourse was going to be. So I told Zachariah G when he asked me, what's the title of your discourse? I said, I don't know. And in that moment, that's when I actually knew. That's when I knew that's exactly what we're going to be talking about. That not knowing, the trusting in the ever-shifting, flowing landscape of the divine that rearranges space and time to ensure everything is perfectly aligned. You know that feeling, that tingling of the spine? You know that's the sign, goosebumps, hair raised, and you can't quite put your finger on it, but you know it in your bones, the essence of your being, that soulful sonar ping that goes beyond the sights of what you are seeing with these two little eyes. But how can we earthbound humans realize what is beyond that which the mind so desperately grasps to go beyond the lies and to know what is truly true? To be honest, I don't know. I really don't know. But luckily, we have a few brave, blessed beings that can come back to earth to share that divine wisdom with all of us and to illuminate a path back to our soulful remembrance. You see, Bhai Sahib Ji is always reminding that the true spiritualist has to go beyond the word. It begs the question, what is the word? You see, the word is a sound, and a sound is heard by our ears. He's pointing to us that we must go beyond our senses, these senses that touch, feel, hear, taste, smell. And the enlightened sages, the yogis, the sadhus, they too are always reminding us that we are not the body, that we are not the five senses. And we must go beyond all of these things. We must become innocent in no sense. To become innocent is to be in no sense. That we are not attached to the body or our senses. That our hearts and minds become pure and are rooted in that perennial truth that spans all ages and is forever eternal. To be innocent or in no sense, that's before we became attached to our identity, to that we are the body, that we are our senses, that we are our feelings or our thoughts. And so when we're born, when we're first born, we immediately come into this material plane and we come into that ego, and the ego starts to learn how to navigate reality by attaching itself. And essentially, the divine or infinity consciousness gets stuffed into this very small box. And we become constrained by the beliefs that we hold, the beliefs that we are told by our parents, our society, school, friends, family. But what happens when we reverse engineer this process and detach from these self-limiting belief systems? There's a couple of beautiful stories. Sakis. I'm not going to go all the way into each of the Sakis, and most of us would know them, and you can look them up yourself. But when Prahlad was being sentenced to death by his own father, Harnakash, he went beyond the known, and he went into the unknown. In the moment where he was told to wrap his arms around this extremely hot pillar, that surely he would die, he actually saw a little ant on that pillar. And he took it as a sign that the Lord said, Prahlad, you're going to be safe. You're protected. If that ant can survive, so will you. And somehow in his mind, he went into pure faith in innocent love and devotion, and he was saved. But imagine that if Prahlad had a thought that stayed in his, and he stayed in his mind, surely he would have burned to death if he didn't have that faith that he was protected. Another beautiful Saki is Bhagat Danaji, and he was being mocked by a pundit. But in his innocent devotion, he went beyond the known and into the unknown, because he ran up to that pundit and he said, how, something like he saw that he was so holy and he had this image and this projection that this guy was really an elevated being. And instead, this pundit just mocked him and gave him a rock and said, "This is the divine, worship this rock." You know, but in Bhagavata's innocence, in his loving devotion, he worshiped that rock with all of his faith, and the divine literally manifested before his very eyes. And now he's mentioned in Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji. So if Dhanji would have stayed in his mind, maybe he would have never, he would have just seen that rock just as another rock. It's nothing. It's not of the divine. It's not the creator. And he would have never met that divine. And there are so many stories of the past, the enlightened, the sages, Jesus walking on water, Buddha stopping a boulder, Guru Nanak Dev Ji also stopped a boulder, Krishna, and many, many others, etc., from various lineages all across the world, all across history, that show acts of extreme faith that seem to supersede what us normal humans believe is capable. And thus the masses, we like to call them miracles. But to those that have achieved such enlightened states, these displays of spiritual power without pure intention are merely distractions along the path. And maybe in those moments, they felt it was necessary to display something that was supernatural or beyond the mind. Or maybe they were just little winks, little peeks beyond the window of what's possible. The divine saying, you think you know, but it's not exactly as it seems, right? There's a lot more to what's going on here. And Albert Einstein, very famous scientist, is attributed the following quote: "Everyone knew it was impossible until a fool who didn't know came along and did it." And the word fool is a bit harsh here, but the point he is making is that the person who doesn't have this limiting belief that it's impossible, that it can't be done, actually thinks it can be accomplished, even though everyone else says it's not possible, it can't be done. So the person who's not bound by a limited intellect can achieve what others thought could not be achieved. Who places these limitations upon us? As we previously stated, our parents, friends, societies, governments, marketing, other companies, the collective consciousness as a whole, but mainly it is ourselves. Because there is a lot of noise going on outside of us, but we have to choose to allow what noise to come into the gates of our hearts, beyond the gates of our hearts. So it is the belief systems that we choose to agree to and plant deep within ourselves. Those are the ones that we must become aware of. Those are the ones we must break free of to liberate our souls. Those are the ones we must break so that we may be able to go beyond the word, beyond the intellect of the mind. For the intellect itself, the mind itself, is a big trap. The ego aims to objectify, classify, segment, separate, categorize, organize, reorganize, and organize some more. And it does that with good intentions because it needs a way to relate with what it's sensing. It needs a way to relate with what it's experiencing so that we can make sense of what it believes to be external from itself, this world that we see and we feel and we smell and we taste and we touch. However, this naming and this labeling only defines and confines an infinite mind of 4 straight lines, a box of thoughts within your head that becomes a spider web of dread. And then when you're moving around like a fly in the spider web, then Maya has you trapped within her little game. And any move you make, you actually only further entangle yourself, enmesh yourself in that web. You get even more stuck the more you try to fight. Sangaji, it's a sticky situation, no doubt. The mind and the intellect are not inherently bad. In fact, when purified, these are valuable tools to the true spiritualist. But through countless lives lived in ignorance and sin, the mind has become corrupt and leads those who are not alert astray off the path of enlightenment. And thus the true spiritualist must be aware of how the mind attempts to deceive them. We must pay attention to what the gurus say to keep our that keeps our intellect shrouded in darkness and ignorance. And if this is you from these following examples, please don't panic. We're all human. We're prone to make mistakes, lots of them. I'm speaking from lots of experience here. But let these words be a shining light to help guide you where you can reflect and increase your self-awareness to continue to clean, clear, and purify your mind. And so Guru Nanak Dev Ji says, through stubborn-mindedness, the intellect is drowned. One who becomes Gurmukh, the truthful, is saved. So Gurmukh is that being that faces the light. Manmukh is that being that faces away from the light. And therefore, Guruji is saying, stubbornness will destroy our intellect. So we're going to look at some of these qualities that destroy our minds, that destroy our intellect and corrupt them, right? So stubbornness is one of them. And Babaji, which is Bhai Sahibji's spiritual master, Babaji would always remind Bhai Sahibji that anything that is too rigid will snap. And thus we must be aware where we are unwilling to bend and ask ourselves, what are we so deeply attached to that we can't find flexibility in our hearts and minds to be able to move forward together? This stubbornness only builds walls of separation that can lead to damaged relationships, missed opportunities for growth and learning, and potential isolation. It can lead to ethical problems, hinder teamwork, and cause spiritual difficulties due to the refusal to acknowledge error, seek help, or yield to truth. When people are stubborn, it's like my way or the highway. Even if they see the truth in front of them, it's like that veil of ignorance like prevents them from actually accessing it and being able to make the transformation that's necessary in that moment. So be keenly aware of when you are being stubborn in your life and reflect upon that. And Guruji also says the intellect of the self-willed manmukh is engrossed in falsehood. Again, manmukh is the one who is the egotistical who faces away from the light. So he is engrossed in falsehood. What is falsehood? Those that lie. Perhaps they bear false witness or testimony, or they manipulate. And they further entangle themselves in attachment to the illusion of Maya. The question is, why lie? Why are you doing this? It's because you're holding on to something that you don't want to let go. You're trying to protect something that's actually temporary. Those things that you're trying to hold on to, anything you could see with your five senses or experiencing your five senses, it's not going with you. So you have to ask yourself, why are you doing that, right? Selfishly attempting to be clever, to get something for themselves at the expense of others is not pleasing to the divine. Lying destroys trust in your relationships, usually leads to further dishonesty, as one lie means you have to lie again and again and make it bigger and bigger, which can lead to anxiety, guilt, shame, and lower self-esteem. And all those negative emotions can lead to health issues. It's actually scientifically proven that when you're in these lower vibrational states, that your immune system is hindered. Not to mention the social isolation once you're actually labeled as a liar in your community. And so it's a vicious cycle that only destroys the one who actually lies. And they must keep their lie alive, make their story grander and bigger until it finally all collapses on itself. And it's a big show. And the truth is revealed. Because on a long enough timeline, Sangatji, the truth always prevails. You might be able to live with that lie for a day, a month, a year, as long as you think you can, but the divine keeps record, and the truth will be revealed. So Guruji continues, and he goes on to say, the intellect of the mind is like a drunken elephant. And so let's imagine a drunken elephant. A drunken elephant is big, it's loud, it's throwing its weight around, it's crashing into things, it's out of control, And so we must learn to tame our minds, lest we allow it to run rampant and cause undue pain and suffering to ourselves and others when we can't control it or rein it in. And Guru Amar Das Ji says, their intellect and understandings are perverted. They just don't understand. They're filled with greed and corruption. So this intellect, this mind, and we believe we know, when you look in the mirror, you think, oh yeah, I know who I am. I see my body. I see my thoughts. Maybe you're even, meditating and you're aware of the thoughts and the emotions that are coming up. We believe that we know. And in this knowing, we believe that we have accomplished something, that but the that we understand something, but we don't understand the truth. We don't understand that our mind is actually perverted. We do not understand the perspective of the enlightened. Unless you are enlightened yourself, how is it possible to see from that perspective? How can someone at the base of the mountain describe the view from the top of the mountain? It's not possible. Yet so many false teachers, yet so many people that are in their spiritual ego try to preach from that place as if they've reached somewhere, as if they know something. He also goes on to show that greed is the driving force. And we must become aware of that to keep our intellect pure. Maybe it's greed for attention. Maybe it's greed for money. Maybe it's greed for, a certain level of respect or something like this. Greed doesn't just have to be monetary. You can be greedy with energy, right? So we just don't see it. And Guru Amar Das Ji continues by saying, in the darkness of intellectual ignorance, she cannot see her husband, and her hunger does not depart, her being the soul bride. So there's a relationship between the true spirituals and the divine, that we're the soul brides marrying our husband, Lord. And so he's saying that in our intellectual ignorance, we cannot see our husband, we cannot see the divine, and our hunger does not depart. So when we are in this dualistic mind, Guruji warns us that we will not be able to see God. We will not be able to see the one, we will not be able to experience the oneness, that our desires, that our passions will not wane, that our hunger to be fulfilled will not stop or cease. We will tirelessly search to be fulfilled in a world that cannot fulfill our souls. We would try to look for love outside of ourselves. We would try to look for validation from material things or praise from others. We would try to fill that empty void within ourselves with things that are temporal. And furthermore, in Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji, Bhagat Benny Ji says, you are overflowing with sexual desire and your intellect is stained with darkness. You are held in the grip of Shakti's power. And this is another clear warning that sexual desire can ruin our intellect. Lust. If we are out of balance and being pulled out of our center by these very strong passions, these are powerful emotional waves that rise up in the body and create this urge, create this attraction that feels like we can't turn our head away. We can't not stop taking an action or a thought or saying something, And so to recap a few things that Guruji warns us about, it's stubbornness, falsehood, a lack of control, greed, ignorance, and sexual desire that keeps our minds stuck in a corrupted intellect. That's what keeps dyeing our mind, like submerging our minds in mud. That's like literally preventing us. But there's one thing that's worse than all these that Guruji spends significantly more time focused on talking about in the Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji, and that's egotism. Right? So you'll see multiple references to this specific topic. And egotism is that knowingness of I know. I know. Oh yeah, I know about enlightenment. I know how spirituality works. I know the path. I know this. I know that. No. The ego is the I. The ego knows, and Maya knows, that it's trapping the truth of who you are behind your I. Right? So Maya is very happy when somebody believes that they know how things work, whether it's through science or spirituality, and they've figured out how the universe works. Maya is so happy because that person cannot learn anything more. They're lost, right? And the gurus have to say the following about this. The egotistical are engrossed in egotism, ensnared by the intellect of the mind. Wherever they go, they do not think of the Lord. They are blinded by intellectual egotism. Maya torments us through intoxication with intellectual pride. Intellectual egotism and the great love for Maya are the most serious chronic diseases. The intellect of the mind is false. Only the Lord is true. And the foolish intellectuals are forever in spiritual darkness. That's pretty drastic. Like, they literally say that this is the most serious chronic disease and that the foolish intellectuals are forever in spiritual darkness. Like, they're putting a pretty strong emphasis on intellectual egotism and pride, that these are the most dangerous and tricky and subtle things that the true spiritualist must be aware of. And some people, they may accrue this egotism just by reading books, becoming scholars, debating endlessly about religion or spirituality. Some people like to talk about all the spiritual experiences as if they've achieved some higher state or display their spiritual powers that they've gained through meditation or blessings. Some people believe that they're just better than others because they think they know more, than someone else. And this can lead to a variety of issues, such as superiority complexes, maybe a lack of empathy for somebody else that's on the path, creating increased conflict through, that stubbornness and having different viewpoints. Could be rooted in insecurity, like why they're presenting themselves as this very high level spiritual being. Of course, this prevents spiritual growth, and this overconfidence in one's own ability can lead to massive failures later down the road. And thus, this path is treacherous, Sangachi. Just when you think you're making some sort of progress, one of the five thieves is creeping up behind you without you even knowing. And so, when we first awaken, we're hungry for that knowledge. We're hungry for that intellect. We want to know the truth. We're seekers. And we consume those books, those videos, those discourses, anything that we get our hands on or experience to add to our understanding of the path. But little do we know that this could all potentially, and more often than not, leads to just adding on to a spiritual ego or shifting an unawakened ego into a spiritual ego. And so at first we start out by saying, I don't know. Like, I really don't know about spirituality, but this is simply a self-limiting belief system that holds us back. When we just think we don't know anything, we can't ever know anything. It's just not possible to know. Then we start walking the path and we start believing, oh, I know. This is the path. This is how it's done. These are the techniques. These are the tools. This is where I should go. This is what I should do. And this is also a self-limiting belief system that holds us back. And a lot of people just stay stuck in that state, not realizing that all they've done is just created a new version of themselves, created a new iteration of their ego, just an evolution of their ego, without actually removing it or cleaning their intellect, right? Instead, they just added to it. And now they're more puffed up. And so we get to follow the examples of the satsanga, those true teachers, the company of the holy, that say, I don't know, which is the next stage. Not out of ignorance, not because they don't know, but out of humility, out of faith, out of trust and surrender. And I know what you're thinking. Well, River, are you telling me it's a waste of time to read, have these experiences? Is knowing bad? How much should I know? No, absolutely not. There's nothing wrong with any of those things. They're all part of the path. They're all helping us get to the next step of development. It is akin to a river coming down the mountain. Information forms these banks. It forms the way that the river is guided, the flow of the water through the landscape back to the ocean. And if there's no river banks on the sides of the river, well, guess what? The water just floods over into the plains and it just damages the land, and the water never actually makes it to the ocean. However, there's too much information, if there's too much attachment to the intellect, this can also be a hindrance because this creates a dam that stops the river's flow and prevents the water from reaching the ocean as well. As they say, not too little, not too much. You must know enough to not know. You must, as Bhai Sahib Ji says, go from the known to the unknown. For the true spiritualist, at first, we must study the path. Then we follow the path. And finally, we become the path. So for the true spiritualist, Guru Ji is the path, or those enlightened beings that you follow in your lineage, that is the path. And Guru Arjan Dev Ji gives us a perfect example of this when he says, I am worthless. With such a shallow intellect, you are always merciful to the meek. He is literally reminding us, reminding our minds, reshaping our minds, reshaping our attitudes, showing us how to have a conversation with the divine. That Guruji is saying, I have such a shallow intellect, right? He's showing us how to have that conversation if we wish to make this transformation of our intellect, to crumble the ego, to humble ourselves before the Lord. That is why the gurus are the path, the enlightened are the path. If that is the attitude, then what else is Guruji saying that we can actually do? What must we do to overcome this stained, corrupt mind? Guruji says, whatever is seen shall pass away. Abandon the intellectualizations of your mind. So he's saying, whatever you see with your senses, this is all temporary, it's gone. Abandon the intellectualizations of your mind. Excuse me. Says Kabir, I have renounced my restless intellect. But when the intellect is stained and polluted by sin, it can only be cleansed by the love of the name. Furthermore, they say, singing the glorious praise of the Lord, the intellect becomes pure and sublime. So renounce the intellectual cleverness of your mind and listen to the teachings. The Guru washes away the filth of the evil intellect of his Sikh. So here are some ways they're directly telling us and showing us how we can overcome this polluted mind. The Gurus first tell us, renounce your intellect. What does it mean to renounce? This means to declare your abandonment of the mind. This means to separate yourself from your own perceived intellect, that of which you believe you know. To say it is not yours anymore. You do not claim it. You do not own it. It is not yours. It is not mine, right? So you're creating separation between that perverted thought, those corrupt thoughts, those corrupt emotions, those corrupt ideas, and your true self. You're creating that separation, right? That is not mine. Get it out of here. No longer are we going to go along with those negative thoughts that keep me in conflict within myself and with others. Then they say, chant the name of the Lord. In whichever way you connect to the divine has many different names across many different lineages. Chant that name with love and devotion in the form of mantra meditation. This will cleanse, clear, and purify your thoughts, because every time you have an angry thought, and if you're connected to the Shabad mantra, that anger is replaced by the purity of the Shabad. It's just that simple. It's like you're just overwriting a line of corrupt code in a program. You're just overwriting a virus with truth. Then they're saying to sing the praise of the Lord in the form of song, poetry, kirtan, music, maybe it's expression, arts, right? This will keep your mind attuned to the divine. Instead of your mind wanting to roll around in the dust and the mud, it'll keep it in a very elevated state. They say to listen to the teachings of the enlightened. So study your holy scriptures. You have to study the words of the enlightened. You have to study the lives of the enlightened. How did Guruji speak to the divine? How did Guruji go about the world? What are those stories that inspire us to also live that beautiful lifestyle? And lastly, they mention, come into the satsanga. In the presence of the Guru, your intellect will be cleansed. So it's so important to find the satsanga and come in their loving presence with humbleness and humility in your heart. And so in listening, you will receive a blessing and your intellect will be cleansed. Then once you do these things, what happens? We always love to know what the result is. Luckily, Guruji already tells us. Maybe it's a little bit of motivation to the true spiritualist. But he goes on to say, make your intellect your instrument and love your tambourine. Right? So the mind now becomes a tool to the true spiritualist. Instead of something that was holding us back, giving us all these negative thoughts and getting us entangled in fights and overwhelming emotions and this, that, and the other thing. No, it becomes the instrument of the true spiritualist. And now your love can be shared far and wide, like the banging of a tambourine, right? So use your mind as a tool and spread your love like that joyful sound of a tambourine with people enjoying that music. And so what happens when you do this? One who is attuned to the Lord has the most sublime and exalted intellect. Intuitive peace and poise well up within, and the intellect is awakened to spiritual wisdom. Perfect is the intellect, and most distinguished is the reputation of those whose minds are filled with the mantra of the perfect Guru. That humble being who eliminates his ego is at peace. He is blessed with an ever stable intellect. And so the Gurus say that our intellect will awaken to spiritual wisdom. So there's a very clear delineation between the intellect of the mind and this spiritual wisdom or divine wisdom. This is a stage that goes beyond the mind, beyond the word, beyond duality itself. This is divine wisdom. This is unity consciousness. Our intellect will be exalted, right? In this divine wisdom, our intellect will be exalted, and we'll be at peace and in perfect poise. We won't be distracted or attracted by the play of Maya. Internally, we will be completely fulfilled. We will need nothing, and we'll be content and at peace. And in this state, we will be respected. Our reputation will be spotless because, like Guruji, we won't make any ripples in other people's hearts. We will tread very gently and softly and spread that beautiful divine fragrance, right? And in so our minds will be stable. No longer will they be thrown around by negative thoughts or these emotions that seemingly put us into reactionary behavior patterns. Instead, we will be centered in that truth, and we will be filled with the Shabad mantra. As Bhai Sahib Ji says, every single hair follicle will vibrate in that divine name. And so Guru Arjan Dev Ji illustrates this final stage perfectly, of course, by saying, I know nothing, and my intellect is inadequate, and you are my understanding, intellect, and knowledge. I only know what you cause me to know, Lord. So, from identifying the intellect to understanding what we can do to cleanse, clear, and purify a corrupt intellect, to the result of having a purified intellect, to a perfect example of what it means to not know. The enlightened have shown us every step of the way. They've shown us everything. They made this path as easy and simple as possible. But we must be willing to seek the truth, to study the teachings and apply those teachings to our lives. We must be willing to surrender to exactly where the Gurus have stepped. And that is the simplicity and also the difficulty of the entire path. Who can put their foot exactly where the Master has stepped? They show us the attitude, the demeanor, and even the words they used when they talked to the divine himself. That we can use those same ideas and verbiage to have a conversation with the divine, to be able to shift from I know to I know nothing, from I am to you are, from I know to I know only what you cause me to know, Lord. As Bhai Sahib Ji says, from the known to the unknown. Sangat Ji, friendly reminder, meditate, meditate, meditate. Perform that selfless service and build beautiful, strong communities wherever you are. Live peacefully and prosper. Seek the company of the holy. And may the divine bless us all to stay connected to his path. And may we come to know, may what we know be replaced with his truth. So Sangat Ji, thank you so much for listening today. That brings our discourse to a close. Waheguru Ji Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Fateh. And on that note, Sangat Ji, I'd love to share a beautiful poem with you all as well. And then I believe there may be some words or a prayer to close everything out. And this poem was actually inspired from my recent trips in Egypt by a dear sister Dina, who prompted this. And I think she's on the call. So enjoy. A stream of dreams that interweave to converge and emerge as a flowing river to towards the ocean of oneness. But before one can taste the sweet nectar of bliss, they must go through all of this. We all fall down from the mountaintop as an avalanche of thoughts, with no stop in sight, melting into a puddle of tears that propel the worst of our fears, forgetting that God is near and dear. We lose all control as our emotions begin to steer, the truth veiled as the darkness of night. Maya asks us to fight, beating her war drums, our legs take flight. We run and we run and we run, lost in the never-ending conundrum. Do we take the left path or the right? The darkness or the light? One river, two banks, infinite possibilities in between you and me and divine unity. The wise choose the smoothest wave to ride, into the light inside can no longer hide. Or the dumb succumb to the rocks that block the flow, and you become numb, a babbling fool, deaf, blind, and dumb, insensitive to the joy of life. Surrender, 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 until your heart is soft and tender, and you return to sender. But who can take the beating of life, the ups and downs, the whirlpools that spin us all around, with a smile on their face, and return to that heavenly place that floats above the sky, and you no longer need to question why. Why is God doing this to me? Emotional turbulence leads to choppy waters. The false lose their clarity, but the true focus. One eye aligned to the Most High, from the top to the bottom until the river merges into the ocean. When we begin to look within, we can learn how to avoid sin and accrue the virtues of the tried and true. But who can I follow? A river asking how to flow, a light asking how to glow, but deep down inside, your soul already knows. So stop looking outside of windows and search what you hold within your heart. Trust yourself to overcome and break apart the dark, for you are the light that blesses the world with a love so pure that bathing in your holy waters is the cure. When you choose to bank on the river of life and reach your true potential, remembering what is truly essential, that it doesn't matter what you know or don't know. Just show love for one and all, and love all as one, and then the game of love shall be done and won. Why? Thank you so much, Sangaji. Blessings to you all.